guys, once again it's Graham with Tutorial Clarity. I was messing around in After Effects with the plugins Trapcode Particular and Trapcode Shine to see what I could come up with. After I had a pretty neat effect, I integrated it to be in sync with some audio, and this is pretty much what I got.
All around me are familiar faces, worn out places.
Right, so this isn't too hard of an effect, but it might be nice for an intro to like your movie making or perhaps an ending credits scene. Really, it's completely up to you. So let's begin by creating a new composition. Go up here to Composition, New Composition, and you can pretty much just copy my settings here. I have my duration set to 20 seconds. Feel free to pause the video if you need to, and click OK. To start off, all we need to do is create a few layers that are required to achieve the effect, as well as maybe import some audio into our composition. So first things first, let's go ahead and import the audio. Right-click over here in my projects file, go to Import, File, and on my desktop, click on Mad World. This is a WAV file. As always, I use WAV files within After Effects. It has problems with MP3s. And yeah, I'm going to drag that onto my composition. And there you go. Now the next thing I'm going to do is create a solid layer for our particles. I'm going to go to Layer, New, Solid, and I'll call this Particles. Make sure it's comp size and hit OK. Now once we have our effect in place, we're going to be working with a camera, and if you've watched any of my previous tutorials, I always use a null object with the camera too. So I'm going to go to Layer, New, Camera, preset to 35 millimeters, enable depth of field, that's up to you. Click OK. Click OK, and I'm going to come down here and call this just camera instead of camera 1. Then I'm going to go to Layer, New, Null Object, and I'm going to come down here and call this one Null. And off the bat, I know I'm going to be parenting it, so I'm just going to grab this pick whip here and I'm going to parent the camera to the null object. So after I've parented the camera to the null object, I'm going to change the null object to a 3D layer. And we're going to get started for the first thing on our particles. So I'm going to click my particles layer, make sure that's selected. And you can pretty much hide the null layer, by the way, so you don't have that red box in the middle of your screen, as all null objects do. So I have my particle layer selected, and I'm going to go to Effect, Trapcode, Particular. And the first thing that we're going to do is pull down the emitter, set the initial particles per second to 1,200. Set the direction to disk. We'll set the velocity down here to about 70. And doing that, we're going to change the velocity random to 0 and the velocity from motion. So both those are going to be 0 as well. We're going to pull this back up. That's it for that. Let's go into particle. We're going to change the lifespan per second to 8 seconds. And we're not going to bother with any of these settings. We're just going to mess with the size here, and we're going to make it really small because we're going to have a bunch of particles. And I don't want to slow down your rendering speed as much as it's already going to be slowed down. So be prepared for that, by the way. Lots of particles on screen. And we're going to go down here to Set Color over Life, Color over Life, and pretty much you can mess with this however you like. I'm just going to select the default blue, and down here at the end, I'm going to double click this dark blue. And I'm just going to change it a little bit, something like that. So let's see what we got so far. And alright, that's looking pretty cool. That's looking pretty cool, is the basic effect. They're all emitting from the center, and all's looking good thus far. So that brings me to the next part of this. Let's go down here into Physics, and go to Air. And let's go into the turbulence field. I'll just pull this down a bit. Alright, now we're going to set the effect size to 4. Effect position, let's have it affected by 100, value of 100. We're going to have it affected a lot, but here's what we're going to do. Not out of the gate. We're going to affect it, let's say, 4 seconds after they emit. So 4 seconds after they emit from the center is when they're going to start moving around chaotically. And what else are we going to do here? let's set the scale. Let's modify the scale and just move that up a value of 2, so it's a little bit more intense. And yeah, we'll pull this back up, pull this back up, pull that up, and the next thing we're going to do is add the star glow to this. So you go to Effect, Trap Code, and Star Glow. Just pull up this particulars now that we're done with that. And I'm going to change the streak length on this Star Glow effect to 60. Change the boost light to something like 5. And let's see how this is looking. Yeah, it's kind of hard to notice as of now. Kind of hard to notice. But that's okay, because our expressions are going to take care of things. So let's go to Color Map A, and let's change the highlights to white, or keep them at white, moreover. Change the midtones to a light blue, and let's change the shadows to white as well. This is just on our first color map. There is a third, but that's not selected by default. We're just dealing with 2, color map A and B. And for the highlights on color B, we're going to change that to a light blue. And let's change our midtones as well to a more solid light blue, something down here. And let's change the shadows as well to about that color. We're really dealing with blues. I mean, you can deal with whatever colors you want, but just scrolling through here. All right. Right, so there's also one other thing that I forgot to do, and I apologize about this, but it's very interesting. If you go under Particular again, come down here to Motion Blur, turn Motion Blur on, and then change the shutter angle to something lower, like 30. So there's just a little bit of motion blur. You get a little bit of motion blur around the edges, or when things emit pretty rapidly from the center, which is going to be nice. Because once we modify our camera and the star glow effect starts to come a little more into play, which I'll show you if I just temporarily zoom in here, you can see that the glow starts emitting from the center. As I said, you can always mess with the colors as much as you like, but yeah, I'm just going to zoom back out, or I'm going to reset that value for now, and we're going to move on. In fact, let's go ahead and take care of our camera animations now. And the 3D camera animations really make your composition come alive, especially with these particles once we get them in sync with the audio. So it's a very simple keyframe. If you go under Camera, Camera Options, and we're going to modify the zoom. So we're going to come back to the beginning of our composition on the timeline, and we're going to left click the stopwatch, and then scroll to the end of the timeline. And let's do it up to about 5 seconds. Seems a little better. I want to keep the same zoom level in there, and I want it to go in relatively quick. So I'll zoom in to the point where I feel comfortable. Let's say about there. 2635. And yeah, now let's get started on animating in 3D rotation, 3D space with our null object, since our camera is parented to our null object. So let's pull down our null object, and all we're going to be messing with is the X and Y rotation. So let's come back to the beginning of the composition here, and left click the stopwatch for both. And right when our camera kind of zooms in at full, see how it kind of zooms in there? When it zooms in at full and it's at 5 seconds, I want to be at a specific point. And you can animate this however you like, but really, I mean, you can animate it however you like. So let's mess with the Y rotation. Let's say I want it to be like right there, and that's pretty neat. Let's mess with the X a little bit. Maybe this time around move the Y a little more, and that's looking pretty hot. So at 5 seconds, when it's fully zoomed in, I want it to be at that point. And then let's move up, and let's say I want to go like to 10 seconds, and let's change the X rotation again. Something like that. Maybe the Y rotation a little more, give a little more variance. And just find some good angles. That's all you're doing. Scrubbing through the timeline, finding good angles. Let's do a quick 180-degree turn like I had in the effect. So let's go to like 1 second, and I'm going to change the X rotation completely around, opposite, to like there.